Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC on ESPN 33, Blaydes versus Daukaus. We can't call it UFC Vegas anything because the UFC is taking off. This one will be in Columbus, Ohio at Nationwide Arena. It's definitely the UFC's first stop back in Ohio since COVID. I didn't look to see how long it had been before that. But yeah, UFC bring in a 15-fight card that just got trimmed down to 14, but still a pretty big and meaty lineup of fights. Here to break them down with me is Khizriev, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. I, of course, am Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I love how, and I've said this before, how I just jokingly call myself the executive producer of the YouTube page, and it just like took over. And I do two shows, and I don't even host one of them, but I appreciate that.
I host it, and I call you the executive producer, so it's my call. And
you do way more. Yeah, you do way more than I do. Yeah, I'm doing good, man. We got a good card. This I'll say about this card. It's pretty deep, and for a fight night, it's really good. I'm feeling so good about the card until I get to the main event, and then I'm like a little disappointed.
Agreed. And this wasn't the originally scheduled main event. This had been Jan Blachowicz versus Alexander Rakic, which that would have been a sensational main event.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
As something they had to throw together on. How long ago was that? Yeah, it was late January. They had some time. But, when you have 30 fight nights a year, not all of the main events are going to be bangers because they have to make sure that the 12 pay-per-views are, and usually they're loaded with 2 title fights just in case. So, you're left with what's left.
Yeah, it's tough because you have a unpopular guy in Curtis Blaydes who's never really got over with the fans, and then you have Chris Daukaus coming off his first big fight of his career, and he got brutally knocked out. So that doesn't have a lot of buzz. And then the winner, does the winner really establish themselves in the heavyweight division? I guess if I'm thinking about the phone call, right now, say I know obviously Francis Ngannou's out for 9 months, they're saying, or who knows, we'll say a year. Yeah. So this time next year, but say hypothetically we find out, it was misdiagnosed and he's out a month, he can fight anytime. I'm thinking about on the UFC, I'm calling up first guy I'm calling John Jones. Second guy I'm calling, I know Stipe Miocic is fighting, but Stipe Miocic. Then Tuivasa. Then how far till I get to the winner of this matchup?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, and we might as well get this out of the way now. I'll say it now. There is nothing that Curtis Blaydes can do on Saturday to change his place in the order. He can make it worse if he loses, but there's nothing he could do to win. He could do a Mortal Kombat fatality and rip Chris Daukaus' spine out of his lifeless body. And against Ngannou, he's still the 10th dude, in the list at best.
All right. I'm going to say this. If he does pull the spine out of Chris Daukaus, I'll move him up from 10 to 7.
It's but let's see him do it against a top 5 guy.
Yeah. And then if he pulls the spine out and then takes a bite out of it, I'll move up to 5th.
Yeah, well, at that point, they probably make him fight Leon Edwards. Yeah. Get rid of one of these guys.
Leon Edwards gets Curtis Blaydes before he gets a title shot.
At welterweight. It's
yeah.
Oh, Leon, we laugh because we love you, man.
Yeah. Nobody's called for Leon Edwards' title shot more than me and you have.
Yeah. But normally, you and I are always very frank about how excited we are for these cards going into it. When we sit down to the preview, we've done, a week or how much tape study, how excited are we? This one, normally when we get a 14 or 15 fight card, I'm like, oh, dude, I could trim this down to 10. Just chop, 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 chop. I really can't here. Aside from the obligatory heavyweight slobber knocker, there's really only one fight on here where I'm like, you know what? Probably neither of these guys belongs in the UFC. They could lose this fight and I'd be okay. The rest of them, there's some good stuff.
I'm trying to figure out which fight that is that you're saying both guys shouldn't be in the UFC.
I'll tell you when we get there.
Okay. But honestly, I think that the 2 fights on this card that I'm least interested, I'll tell you mine, are actually on the main card. And that's Matt Brown versus Bryan Barberena, which will obviously be utter violence because of who they are. Mm-hmm. And the other one is Alexey Oleynik and Latifi.
And that's the obligatory heavyweight slobber knocker. And my main problem with it is it's probably going to be boring. But as far as depth on this card, obviously we don't know the final lineup aside from Blaydes versus Daukaus is going to be the headliner. But it's almost 100% certain that Matheus Nicolau versus David Dvorak is going to be on the prelims. And those are two flyweights in their 20s that I see easily top 10 upside in, if not more.
You could argue that they probably should be third from the top.
Yeah, in terms of current competitive value, I agree.
Also, speaking of flyweights, I think you can make a strong argument that Kai Kara France and Askarov should be the main event.
If only because it has more direct title implications for its division. Because
the winner,
I mean, if you look at rankings, I mean,
shot, in my opinion,
Blaydes is higher ranked than any of them. But again, we have the problem with he's going to have a long way to go to get back to a title shot.
Yeah, he's in that that weird. The champion has 2 wins over me. Joseph Benavidez, Kobe Covington, not Dustin Poirier, but like that realm.
Yeah, and with Blaydes, it's I got brained both times.
Yeah, and I'm not the most exciting guy to begin with. I'm not the guy that UFC wants to push.
Right. It's not like Max Holloway where it's like, you know what? I lost twice to the champ, but they were both really close. They were both really good fights. The UFC already tried to make that a third time once. No, Blaydes is not in that department.
No.
And you know what? We got 14 fights to talk about, man. Like,
we'll
stop
talk
breaking
about
down
the recap show. That'll be more of the recap show.
Okay. You ready to dive into these?
Yeah.
We head to the featherweight division for a matchup between Luis Saldana and Bruno Souza. Saldana, the 31-year-old American, is 15-7 overall. He is 1-1 since joining the UFC out of Dana White's Contender Series. He won there via knockout, knocked out Vince Murdoch. That'll always win you a few points with me. Good going. But since joining the UFC, won a unanimous decision over Jordan Griffin at UFC on ABC Vettori versus Holland last April. Came back at UFC on ESPN Cannonier versus Gastelum in August and dropped a unanimous decision to Austin Lingo. He'll be taking on Souza. The 26-year-old Lyoto Machida protege is 10-2 overall. He is 0-1 since joining the UFC as the former LFA featherweight champ. His debut was, I believe, on short notice, and it was against an uber prospect in Melsik Baghdasaryan. He took Baghdasaryan took him the distance, but did lose a unanimous decision there. Odds on this one slightly favor Saldana. He's minus 130 as of the week before fight week. Souza plus 110 as the underdog. Keith, we talked about off the top. This is the one fight that I'm really not terribly excited about as far as the potential of the two guys. I'm not sure either of these guys has a whole ton of upside. So I'll be interested to hear because I'm getting the I disagree look from you over there. But my concern with Saldana is he's exhibited holes already, and he's just sort of taking on entry-level featherweights here. I thought he lost the Griffin fight. He won a unanimous decision. It wasn't a complete robbery, but I thought he lost to Griffin. And his problem there was his takedown defense. He's a tall, come forward pressure striker, but his takedown defense was really porous against Griffin. He got taken down a bunch. I mean, he probably outlanded Griffin in terms of sheer numbers, but it wasn't like he was landing a ton of damaging stuff. And meanwhile, Griffin took him down a bunch of times, and he really struggled to get up. Then, he comes back against Lingo and started off well, but was really hittable. Lingo was tagging him up, especially late, and especially because he seemed to slow down as the fight went along. I think those are big problems to have at 145 in the UFC. If you have takedown defense problems, if you're hittable and your gas tank is a disadvantage to you, those all spell trouble against most of the featherweights on the roster. In the case of Souza, my main problem with him is already on the regional scene and in LFA and on the way up, he's already, his fights are closer than they need to be. The Lyoto Machida comparisons are going to be there. He's a Machida student. He presents basically the same, you can tell in the stance and how he moves, but Machida was untouchable until he started taking on top 5 guys. I mean, he won his way all the way to a UFC light heavyweight title, and it felt like nobody ever even just cleanly laid a finger on him. Meanwhile, Souza is like, he's got 10 wins right now, and 3 of them are by split decision. And the ones that I've seen, they weren't unjust split decisions. But the problem is he doesn't land enough to really put his stamp on rounds and win rounds. So his fights always come out closer than they need to be. He's not a finisher, really, even at the LFA level. And his rounds are closer than they need to be. That spells trouble in a division, again, at 145, where you need to string together a bunch of wins to really even start drawing attention. I don't see him being able to do that. However, in this fight, I do kind of like him. If Saldana is going to come forward, which he does, and he's going to be kind of hittable, which he is, and there's the possibility that he starts to tire out, those all spell good things for Souza. Because Souza against Baghdasaryan, Baghdasaryan came out like a house on fire and really put it on him and, looked like he was going to fulfill all the hype about him. But Souza took over that fight late. I thought he won the 3rd round, and that's, a good sign for him, a bad sign for someone in Saldana who lost to Lingo by kind of starting to fade late and getting tagged up. So I think this will be one of those fights where, 9,000 strikes are thrown and about 60 are landed. The booth will probably try to sell us on it being this wild action fight. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of cardio kickboxing here, and give me Souza by decision in the slight upset.
Yeah. See, I agree with you saying. I understand that this is definitely lower level UFC talent. I just think it's going to be. I think it's just a fun stylistic matchup, and it's probably because of those holes you see. Saldana, he's a big guy for the weight class. I mean, he's long and lengthy, as you mentioned. He's got a Muay Thai striking style. He's very athletic. He's elusive. He's a bit of an outfighter with some quick hands, but he lacks that one true one punch end the fight knockout power. Great kicks though. I like his calf kicks. Not a strong wrestler, as you mentioned. He can get taken down. He can get a takedown himself, but he can also be taken down very easy. I remember in my notes I have Jordan Griffin took him down, and to his credit, he does have 4 submission wins. I don't remember who I scored the fight for, Saldana or Griffin. I don't know if I submitted to MMA decisions or not. But I remember that fight being super close. Souza, on the other hand, I think I'm a little higher on Souza than you are. Yeah, he's 26 years old, which I like. Former LFA champ, which I like. He's beaten some. I understand what you're saying. He's got a lot of split decisions, but he's beaten some pretty good dudes like Mike Hamill, Elisha Johns, Kamala Kirk. Yeah. I mean, those are 3 good wins. What I'm most interested on, though, in his last 3 fights, he's missed weight twice. So I wonder if he's going to miss weight for this fight.
Yeah, I mean, he missed weight for the Baghdasaryan fight. I do believe he was short notice, and he missed it by 2 pounds. So it's not great, but
yeah, it was within range. Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah. I understand what you're saying about his comparisons to Machida, because that's a lot of all my next notes are the same thing. I do see some. I think there's definitely some similarities. I mean, they both continually switch stances. They both like to counter strike. He does keep his hands low. I think he's pretty elusive with his movement. I think he moves side to side well. Again, it's the poor man's version of Lyoto Machida. You talked about how Lyoto Machida's prime was untouchable, the master of range. Yeah, you also talk about one of the greatest fighters of all time. So that's why it's the comparisons fits and it doesn't fit.
He's more of a Chinzo Machida.
Yeah. Yeah. It's also when you get these athletes and they get compared to all-time greats, and then they still have a great career, but they never live up to that hype. People are like, oh, this is going to be the next Albert Pujols, and the guy has a great career, but he's not Albert Pujols. There's a reason why. A weird reference of Albert Pujols of all people, but I think he has much better output than Machida had in his prime. Pretty quick hands. He does have that fade back counter, which Machida was the absolute master. It's funny because I always talk about Conor McGregor with that because it's more modern, in my memory. But now that I'm thinking about it, Machida might be the master at that. He can strike while backpedaling, which is another thing that Machida can do. A lot of kicks. I love his front kicks. I think he showed strong takedown defense against Elijah Johns. I think he showed a good get-up game. He does have a few subs in record, and I actually agree with you where he looked strong in the third round of his UFC debut in a fight that he took on short notice, but you got to like that moving forward. I'm with you. I'm surprised that he's the underdog. I'm also picking the slight underdog right here. I think Souza is the better grappler, and more important, I think he might match the kickboxing on the feet. And I saw Saldana, surprisingly, a guy who's known for his kickboxing, like surprisingly get outstruck by Austin Lingo, which I don't like. Saldana was a guy I liked a lot more in the Contender Series, and I feel like less confident than I did then. So give me Souza. I'll say he wins by decision.
I liked him on Contender Series because he knocked out Vince Murdoch. And one of these times, I'll tell the viewers why I love it when people knock out Vince Murdoch. Also, for the record, you and I both did score
right now because I'm curious now.
Okay, I'm happy to tell you. So Vince Murdoch, coming up, Team Alpha Male prospect. He's fighting 145, 155, and he was
real quick. Hold on. Murdoch, was that the one with the head? Like you have a brain? Was he the one with the brain injury or something?
I don't remember that about him, but he's been on Contender Series and Tough because
had the brain injury or something. Okay, continue on.
Yeah, because he was just on the most recent season of Tough as well. Like he got knocked out by Brady Heath.
Yeah, it was him.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
He in kind of the middle of his regional career, he went over to India, fought twice in Super Fight League. For those watching, SFL is probably India's biggest MMA promotion. People like Michael Venom Page came through there early in their career, but he lost both of them, and he sent the Sherdog Fight Finder forged documents from an Indian commission trying to call them I think get one of them flipped to a no contest and one of them flipped to just a win for him by disqualification. And it was one of the first cases that I worked on as a Sherdog Fight Finder volunteer before I was ever front page staff, writing or doing radio for Sherdog. And so I've just always remember that, just Vince Murdoch sending in forged documents to try to get 2 embarrassing losses pulled off of his record. And ever since then, it's made me happy when he loses on film and can't send me any fake documents about it.
You know what, though? He always has the excuse. You'd be like, that whole brain injury thing. I didn't mean to do it. That's what I'm going with. If this gets back to him, go with that, dude.
Yeah.
No one will question you.
Yeah, and I'll look like an asshole for bringing it up.
You already did.
I'm toast. I'm happy to tell my truth, man. Enough people out there probably think I'm an asshole already. Ready to move on to the next fight?
But let's be fair. If someone has to pick between who's an asshole between me and you on the show, I doubt they're picking you.
You're my insurance there. You're like my
yeah. I'm an asshole, but I'm not that guy.
I can do a lot before. Also for the record, you and I both did score Griffin versus Saldana for Griffin. We both scored it 29-28 Griffin. So
okay.
Next up, we head to the middleweight division for a matchup between 2 Russians in their 30s debuting in the UFC, because that's a thing. This is a fight that's definitely going to tax my powers of pronunciation, but we're going to power through it as best we can. It is Aliashkab Khizriev versus Denis Tiuliulin. Tiuliulin steps in on short notice for Abusupian Magomedov. There. Got all the Russian names out of the way. Let's introduce these gentlemen. Khizriev, 31-year-old Russian, is a perfect 13-0 overall. This will be his UFC debut. He fought on the Contender Series all the way back in 2020. You may remember he choked out Henrique Shigemoto in just 50 seconds. It was one of the standout performances of the whole season, and it is now 18 months later that he's debuting. It is, for the most part, not his fault. He has had 4 matchups scheduled since then, and all have fallen through. He was scheduled to fight Wellington Turman. Turman dropped out. He was scheduled to fight Kyle Daukaus. Daukaus had to pull it because one of his cornermen had COVID. He was supposed to fight Alessio Di Chirico. That time, Khizriev pulled out. And then this time, he was scheduled to fight Magomedov, the former PFL standout. Magomedov pulled out. In comes another Russian. It is Denis Tiuliulin. Tiuliulin, the 33-year-old Russian, is 9-5 with 1 no contest overall. This will be his debut as well. He fought most recently last March in UAE Warriors. Before that, he fought in Brave CF. That was his only loss since in the last 2 or 3 years. Highlight reel submission loss, but that's neither here nor there. Since then, he hasn't fought since last March, but he's been kind of knocking around Las Vegas. He's been at Extreme Couture. I don't know if he's officially affiliated himself with them, but he's been in the corners of a lot of Extreme Couture fighters. I know he was working with Sean Strickland as a sparring partner ahead of his last fight. So he's been around, he's been active, and he's one of those guys that, you're in Vegas, you can make weight, you might get the call. Having said that, Khizriev is the strong favorite here. He's minus 300. Tiuliulin plus 240 as the underdog. I'm going to be totally frank and say I don't have a great fix on Aliashkab Khizriev yet. But all of my instincts say that he's gonna fizzle out. But of course, this is me talking, and in a little while here, I'm gonna have to talk about Manon Fiorot that I really, really misjudged coming into the UFC. So when I say that I see Khizriev come in and he's blowing away low-level guys in the first round with just aggression and a really fast, opportunistic ground game, but on top of that, he seems a little undersized. And I think he's going to run into a wall against UFC level competition. Keep in mind that he may be a top 5 fighter a year and a half from now, and I'll be looking like a dumbass. So take that for what it's worth. But if you remember his fight against Shigemoto on the Contender Series, came forward, nailed him with a couple of hooks, took him down, took his back quickly, choked him out. It was over in 50 seconds. That's pretty much what all of his fights on the regional scene looked like as well. Just overwhelming people with punches, comes forward, is a good wrestler. So, he'll use the punches to set up his wrestling, take people down, and then from there, he has a pretty fast back take, and, most of his wins are by rear naked choke. I'm interested to see him enter the cage against Tiuliulin because Denis Tiuliulin, he's 33 years old, and he only has, 14, 15 fights. He hasn't been fighting that regularly recently, but he is a physical specimen. He is an absolute tank. And he's at least been in there against high-level competition. Again, working at Extreme Couture, doing sparring rounds with people like John Strickland, who are, top 10 fighters, moving their way into the title picture. But I think Tiuliulin's skill set actually kind of sets him up for the upset here. I have a hard time picturing Aliashkab Khizriev just being able to charge into range on a much bigger guy that also a boxer by preference, and just stun him with a couple hooks and then take him down effortlessly, and take his back. It's a bit of a flyer here, and there are a lot of unknowns about both these fighters in, at least in my case. But I'm gonna take the flyer here. Give me Denis Tiuliulin to have a fantastic surprise UFC debut and kind of spoil the long-awaited debut of Aliashkab Khizriev. Give me Tiuliulin by decision.
Yeah, a lot of surprises on your breakdown. I don't know what's the most surprising. One that you picked, Denis. I'm just gonna go by the first names.
Perfect.
Two, that you were flawless with Ali's name, Denis's name. You threw out the other Russian they replaced. You threw out the guy in the Contender Series with a tough name. You were hitting everything. Or I don't know if I'm most surprised with the rest of the world and other organizations are pulling Russians from their cards. I'm not trying to get political or whatever. Yeah. The UFC's let's 2 debuting Russians. Let's have them fight each other in Columbus. Yeah. I don't know what I'm most surprised by. Ali is a former Fight Nights Global Champion. He beat Husma Palhares, which we were celebrating a knockout. Beating Palhares, I think everyone can get behind that. I really like him.
Somewhere Mike Pierce just heard the sound of angels, a bell, an angel getting its wings. Shout out to Mike Pierce. You rule, man.
He's on the Contender Series guy I really liked. I liked him. My preview, that was actually third season when I was still previewing him, so I know a lot about him. I liked his going in. Obviously, I liked his performance. Southpaw, he fights with a high guard, throws really tight, compact shots down the middle. He's a pressure striker, good output, good at picking up his opponent's timing, getting inside. He looks for stepping knees, slicing elbows. He's got a mean streak in him. He works the body. A lot of kicks to the body. which I like, especially from the southpaw stance against an orthodox fighter. A lot of kicks to the legs, and then you mentioned his ground game, good wrestling entries, hard ground and pound. He trained. I know he's trained with the Eagles MMA. I don't know if that's his main team, but he's trained with Eagles MMA, which obviously you gotta like in wrestling. And he's got, I think, 4 submission wins on his record. So you like that? Move over to Denis. You said it. He's 33, which obviously, I mean, both these guys 31 and 33. A little later in the game to get into the UFC. Long and lengthy guy. He's a bit of a brawler though. He wants, like, he'll start off the fight trying to slow pace, work off a good jab. He has pretty fast hands, as you mentioned. Throws a lot of combos, but then instantly when his opponent tags him, game plan goes out the door, and he just wants to hold his ground and just throw haymakers. And usually he's the one who wins those brawls because he's got really good power. He's got 8 of his 9 wins have come by knockout or TKO, which you obviously got to like. I like that when he's inside, like his last fight, he won by, or I think it was his last fight. I might be confusing, but he won a beautiful, perfectly timed knee, and he handed like 3 or 4 before he finally put the guy out with a knee. A lot of some inside kicks when he's not brawling. I've seen him rock though. When you invite a brawl, you're gonna get tagged up. He can wrestle. He gets takedowns. I like that he looks to better position. But one thing I don't like about it, he needs to improve his top control. He'll lose position. He doesn't have that Dagestanian style where find a little inch, work it. He has no submission wins, which you can't like. It's kind of hard to get submission wins. You keep knocking everybody out, but he's also been sub twice. Now, we obviously disagree on fights like 2 or 3 times a card, but I think most time, even when we disagree on a fight, where usually, like, I understand why you made a pick, and I think you kind of feel the same way. In this one, you're on an island by yourself, man. I think this is a trash. Like, I like Ali to win easily. I think he's the better fighter everywhere. I think he's the better athlete. I think he's more technical. I think he's got I think he's got much more attacks and skills on the feet than you credit him for. I like him on the feet. I think he's the better wrestler. I think he's the way better pure grappler. I see him. I agree that his best avenue is probably to put the fellow wrestler on his back. I think he's going to do that. I think he's going to work for submission. I think he's going to get a submission. And I'm going to say second round.
Okay.
Yeah, give me Ali Khizriev. My second round sub.
There you go. So some dissension right out the gate. But I got a bonus question for you, because you mentioned an interesting thing about Denis Tiuliulin, where, he comes out and tries to present a composed boxing game. Clearly, he's a well-schooled striker, but like it all goes out the window when he gets tagged. Like, who are some of like the I don't know, like the gold standard for like that type of fighter, where they can strike?
Cody Garbrandt.
It's literally exactly who I was going to say, dude. Cody, I should have just said, let's just write a name on a piece of paper and then hold it up at the same time.
I'm sure there's a lot more guys like that, but Cody Garbrandt was the one I was thinking. I mean, in fairness, we did do tape study of Kai Kara France for this week, so that's probably why Cody Garbrandt. Weird flex was George Gurgel. Remember him?
Yes.
He's like Rich Franklin's jiu-jitsu coach who. Yep. He actually had some boxing skills, but for some reason he just wanted to brawl with everybody. And it's like, dude, and this is when like not everybody was presented as black belts.
Right.
Like there was obviously more than like the early Hoist Gracie days. But like we just screaming like, go for a takedown, like submit somebody. What are you doing? And he just said, brawl it out.
Yeah, he was like the Andy Wang of like the actual UFC level fighter. Yeah, and he was also Dustin Hazlett's jiu-jitsu coach. He's the guy that gave Hazlett his black. Yeah, that
whole crew of that. Like, who else was around back then? Like that. Ohio, right in Ohio too. But
it was in Ohio.
George Giselle will probably be there. Is any Brazilians that need translation? He might be there.
I guess Soy Lafrausto won't be over there anymore since they are no longer married. But
I love that we have a sport where like old veterans and stuff have jobs. Like, imagine if you were watching an NFL game and all of a sudden there was like, oh, there's Ben Coates, the line judge, or this.
Yes, becoming referees is the most obvious one.
Yeah, or like all of a sudden you just like they call it the water boy, and then like
Yeah.
it's like just some random. Oh, there's Johnny. Well, actually, yeah, that's an MMA guy. So I was gonna say there's Johnny Morton running out the water or something.
There's Johnny Morton, like still on a backboard from
Yeah.
like K1 Dynamite 15 years ago.
I just would love if that was the case in other sports. Like Mike Greenwell's working the left field line today.
All right, we head to the flyweight division. It is a matchup that I kind of mentioned off the top as we were talking about this. It's probably going to end up on the prelims, and it is two of the brightest prospects in the men's flyweight division in Matheus Nicolau and David Dvorak. Nicolau, the 29-year-old Brazilian, is 17-2-1 overall. He is 5-1 across 2 stints in the UFC. He went 3-1, and then he was part of the great flyweight exodus that happened after Demetrius Johnson lost, after Henry Cejudo became a 2-division champ, and it looked like the UFC might be about to shut down men's flyweight. At one point, the roster was down to like 11 flyweights. Everyone else had either requested their release or moved up to bantamweights. So he went and took one fight in Brazil, took it was with Brave CF, but I think it was actually probably in Brazil as well. Signed back up with the UFC last year, and he's won 2 in a row. Since being back, he has won a split decision over Manel Kape. That was at UFC Fight Night Edwards versus Muhammad last March. Then a unanimous decision over Tim, the unapologetic cheater, Elliott. And that was in October at UFC Fight Night, Durham versus Rodriguez. And by the way,
jump in for a second?
Please do.
Like, dude, if you get caught cheating with, I don't know how many people watch the UFC, say 1 million people.
Yeah.
Just own it. And don't apologize. Like, I actually liked him, Elliot, even more now. I cheated.
I'm not throwing shade. And he's like, I'm not a martial artist. I'm a fighter, and I'm doing what I can to win the fight. Like, why wouldn't you? And I love that it's basically drawing attention to the problem, because anybody who watches a lot of MMA is like, I got the bingo card. You can grab the fence 3 times. You can get at least 2 eye pokes. You can get at least 2 nut shots before Herb Dean will even give you a strong warning, like, let alone take away a point. Why wouldn't you do that?
I think he's just like, him and his entire team should just live it up. Like, next fight, come out completely greased up. Like, have a moment where like Gina Mazzani distracts the referee, and Tim Elliott throws like the old Mr. Fuji sand in the eye of his opponent, or
He, like, pulls the brass knuckles out of his trunks like some heel. Like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, Gina Mazzani just jumps up on the cage and distracts the referee for a second,
and they're all glory MMA and fitness.
Yeah, like, James Krause jumps in and like clothesline.
Have James Krause to start showing up in like a tuxedo, like. Why wouldn't you? So yeah, when I say Tim the unapologetic cheater, Elliott, it's not really criticism. I'm just reporting the news. Anyway. Nicolau has won 2 straight over Manel Kape and Tim Elliott. He's taking on Dvorak. The 29-year-old Czech is 20-3 overall. He is a perfect 3-0 in the UFC. His 3 wins: Bruno Silva back in March of 2020, Jordan Espinoza in September of 2020, and most recently at UFC Fight Night Font versus Garbrandt last May, Juan Camilo Ronderos, whom he choked out in about 90 seconds. Odds on this one are close, but Dvorak is the slight favorite. He's minus 140, Nicolau plus 120. Keith, both of these guys are on long winning streaks for the division against generally pretty good guys.
Yeah.
They're both under 30 years old. Who have you got in this one? And do you like that they're meeting right now, or is this one of the ones where you wish the 2 prospects wouldn't meet yet?
Yeah, I wish the 2 prospects wouldn't meet yet, but I mean, it is what it is. Obviously, flyweight's not the deepest one, so, and honestly, flyweight is such a good division that the fights are always so good that, like, I feel like every time I'm like, man, I don't want to see either one of these guys lose. Like, there's only so many times I could be like, hey, match him up against Jordan Espinoza. Like you only feed Jordan Espinoza to these guys so many times.
In fact, I think he's gone, and so is Mark De La Rosa. So they're running out of they're running out of the Barry O, like the jobber that they can run out to like lose a match.
Yeah, they're like the Iron Mike Shop or Barry Windham of UFC flyweights.
Iron Mike Sharp. That's
awesome. I think Jordan Espinoza was a state champion wrestler though. So back to this fight. What thing we should do? Like when you announced, your intro, we always complain about the order. Like before we meet, we should put our set order, and then you'd be like, "Hey, this fight," and then we'll go like number 12, number 8. Like, oh, it's actually up number 3.
I love that because I wouldn't just put them in order of best to worst. I'd be like, this would be a perfect main card opener. This would be a perfect prelim headliner. I like that. We'll do it next time.
Yeah, we'll just like set the order. We'll put 1 through 14, and then 14 being the main event. And
better yet, 1 through 11, maybe UFC.
Yeah, the other 3. This should be like a prequel. Oh, you know what? Bring back the Bellator
post-limbs. Well, especially because like it's Sure Dog, we decided we're not going to cover any post-limbs ever again. So those are the ones that we wouldn't have to cover. I'm all for it.
All right. I put all Sam Alvey's future fights in the post-limbs. Okay. This is my favorite fight in the entire card. That and the other flyweight fight, Kara France and Askarov. Both of them are really good talents. I just want to say that Nicolau been in the UFC a little bit longer. I think he's fought a little bit better competition. He's really well rounded. That's just the thing that just stands out to me. Like I try to think like, what is Nicolau? Is he a striker or is he a grappler? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know which side is better. Great footwork, good movement. Is really good at setting up. He actually has a lot of. We talked about Dan Hooker, like good Dan Hooker, where he uses his movement to kind of draw an opponent into his power shots. That's what something Nicolau does really well. Like it's come off like he's being defensive, but what he really likes to do is circle, stop. His opponent keeps coming in, and then time the spot where they're moving in. Something Joanna Jędrzejczyk used to do was the perfect example of that. Just watch Joanna Jędrzejczyk versus Jessica Andrade. That's a perfect example. Fast hands, explosive. Throws some really hard, tight hooks when he lets his hands go. His left hand is a really nice weapon. Underrated power. I probably think of his frame because he's like a kind of skinnier guy. He doesn't really look like he can really crack. I think he's got underrated power, hard leg kicks, and good timing on his takedowns. If you over pursue, whether he's throwing power shots, he'll also drop down, get a takedown. Great grappler. Good ground and pound. He's got, I think, 5 submission wins on his record. Dvorak, just a big dude. Like you look at him for like. If you didn't know anybody, just look at him. I thought he's like a featherweight. Yeah, he's a big dude. He's long and lengthy, counter striker, but really steps into shots. Like he wants a counter strike with power, similar to like a Davidson Figueiredo, where he like when he counter strikes, he wants to put you out with it. He has really good power too. He loves his overhand right, kind of wings it a little bit. Hard kicks. He's not. I don't think he's the wrestler. It technically sound wrestler that. Nicolau is, but he's really good at just scrambling. Like if he was an NCAA wrestler, he'd be like a funk type wrestler where a scramble ensues and shit happens and he's on top like all the time. Really good BJJ. He's got 8 submission wins, so you got to like that, especially a fight that we could have. I think we have good exchanges on the feet. I think we have some good exchanges on the ground. The only thing that surprised me about Dvorak is going way back to his Bruno Silva fight when he was taken out 3 times. I was a little surprised by that. Now, this is such a great fight. As I mentioned, it really well could be the best fight on the card. I think both these guys, like you talked about these guys rising up the range, I think both these guys could be top 5 guys in the division. Like I'm that high on both of them. I'm really, really torn. Like this is the one. It's just one of these. It just happens when you have 14 fights and really, as soon as we finish, I don't know how you do it, but basically as soon as I finish previewing this card, like. After this, I start on the next card, and I have 7 days to really kind of get.
We have a week off before the next card, so I may actually like breathe for a minute. But yes, the usual procedure. Yeah.
No, you know what I'll do? I'll do the Yeah. What I say is instead of having 2 weeks and taking my time preview, no, I'll take a whole week off and then go. Oh shit! I only have so much time. Yeah. Like I'll torture myself. So this is one of those fights I just wished I took more time and really broke down because I'm so like I know I'm going to make the wrong choice because I feel so unconfident picking against the guy I'm going to pick against. But I've seen Nicolau face the better competition of the two. That's not fit of Dvorak. It's just a fact. Like Nicolau's got wins over better guys. I've seen how intelligent he is. He's good at in a close fight getting like a timely takedown to win a close round. Like he seemed like he gets it, and that alone is the reason why I'm going to go with another upset and take Nicolau. But I'm going to show how unconfident I am. I'm going to take it by split decision.
There you go. The infamous Keith Schillen split decision pick comes out. And, if you're new to the show, that's, it's just a prediction that the individual rounds might be tough enough to score that reasonable minds can differ. We get split decisions all the time. They're not, they're not always a terrible thing. And I'm with you here. Like, these guys are both really solid talents. I see them as part of the future of this division for sure. Both of them, no matter what happens this weekend. But Nicolau has definitely faced the better opposition in both of his runs in the division. I mean, to come back and beat Manel Kopp and Tim Elliott, that's really good. Like the Kopp win, I think is going to continue aging well, obviously. And
Elliott didn't cheat enough in that fight. He should have cheated more.
Another glove grab. He needed, maybe have somebody spill some ice in between rounds and, buy him an extra 40 seconds.
Romero style, yeah.
Yeah. I agree with you that, these two guys, they could have met now, or they could have met in a high-level contenders matchup a year or two from now. I don't hate it too bad, just because this is Dvorak's 24th fight and Nicolau's 22nd. So at least it's not like one of these guys is like 9-1 and he's really still a work in progress. I think these guys pretty much are what they are at this point. And all I'm willing to guarantee is that this is going to be a fantastic fight. But I am leaning towards Nicolau for the same reason you are, that he is intelligent. He generally has fought to his best advantage. Like his one loss in the UFC, he got head kicked by Dustin Ortiz. Like Dustin Ortiz is a flawed fighter, but that's one thing he's going to be able to sneak up on people and do from time to time. If Dvorak's power advantage wins out and he stings Nicolau real bad in the first round, and then he goes on to win the rest of the rounds just because Nicolau's stymied by the power, that wouldn't shock me. But I'm going to lean towards Nicolau as well here. And I'm interested to see if this fight goes to the ground, who initiates it, how successful they are, and kind of what positions they end up in on the ground. I expect Nicolau to probably try to hit some opportunistic takedowns in the middle of striking exchanges. I think he's good at that. And, if the ground portion of this fight mostly happens with Nicolau getting Dvorak down and it's Nicolau on top, I think that really works in his favor, even if he isn't able to do a ton of work there, just to have it as a safety valve if he is getting stuff he doesn't like from Dvorak on the feet. So, again, I don't have a ton of confidence in any part of my prediction here other than it should be a fantastic fight. But give me Nicolau by decision as well.
I thought I was being bold by, oh, man, people be like, yo, Keith's so bold. 3 fights, he already took 2 upsets. No, I have Ben going 3 for 3 on the upsets.
But apparently one of them I'm going to feel real dumb on Saturday. But, but this one in particular, my initial impression was I think Nicolau's got this, and that was before looking at the odds, before watching the tape, and actually Dvorak kind of snuck back up in my mind. I came close to picking Dvorak in this one.
Oh, yeah, of course.
The more tape I watched.
I mean, I see the screen. We only have so much space, and man, your balls are taking up the whole space, dude. Holy moly! Ben, there's children might be watching. Come on.
Please, children, don't watch this. We head now to the bantamweight division for a matchup between two fighters who lost their UFC debut and have been undefeated ever since. It is Chris Gutierrez versus Batgerel Danaa. Gutierrez, the 30-year-old Texan, is 17-4-2 overall. He is 5-1-1 in the UFC. As I mentioned off the top, he lost his debut to Hani Barcelos back in 2018. Since then, he is 5-0-1. He had a draw against Cody Durden back in August of 2020. Since then, he has a win over Andre Ewell and a win over Felipe Diaz-Colares. The most recent of those, the Colares fight, was last October at UFC Fight Night Dern versus Rodriguez. He is taking on Danaa. The 32-year-old Mongolian is 10-2 overall. He is 3-1 in the UFC. He lost his debut to Alateng Haley at UFC Fight Night Andrade versus Zhang back in August of 2019. Since then, he is perfect. He has a knockout win over Guido Canetti, a knockout win over Kevin Natividad, and a knockout win over Brandon Davis. The most recent of those, the Davis win, was last October at UFC Fight Night, Ladd versus Dumont. All 3 of those first-round knockouts for him, by the way. So he is on just a tear right now, and he is also the slight favorite in this fight. Mongolian is -150, Gutierrez +125 on the comeback. Keith, I'm not I'm not totally decided on what the upside, the long-term upside of either of these guys is in the division. Like, I love Danaa, but he's almost too exciting for his own good. It just seems to me like a style that is not built for breaking into the bantamweight top 10. But I mean, talk me off the cliff. Like, tell me whether you like this fight, whether you like either of these guys long term, and who you think wins.
Yeah, that's a good question. The question of long term, that is really tough because obviously you have to improve each fight too. You mean right now neither one of these guys are top 10, top 15 guys, but I really like this matchup, and I definitely would have liked the winner moving forward. Again, I mean, 135 is arguably the best division in MMA. I mean, it's freaking loaded.
You know what? You've said that a few times, and I always stop short of agreeing with you. But I would say it is absolutely the most improved division in MMA over the last 5 years. Like,
yeah,
5 years ago, it was not a good division, and now it is in the discussion of the best.
Well, you like how I try to weasel my comment in that? I would say arguably the best. So then someone goes, "No, what are you talking about? 155 is the best." I go, "Well, I didn't say it. I'm saying it's arguably. Someone can make the argument."
Yeah. Now you're arguing. So hey,
and then when somebody says, "Oh yeah, 135 is the best," I go, "Yeah, totally. That's what I've been saying." Like, listen, I'm not good at many things, but being a weasel, I am good at. Yeah, back to this fight. So, just like Gutierrez is a guy that he's very technically sound striker. Like, I like what he does technically. He uses feints really well to set up his shots, but bit of a point fighter. You know, he's just kind of touches, and when there's an open, then he'll unload power shots. But he's not gonna knock too many people out, even though he has a couple of knockouts. But I just like what he does. He stays composed in himself. Everything comes off a jab. I like that he goes down to the body. Fantastic kicks. I mean, you go back to the Vince Morales fight. He finished the fight just kicking everybody's off.
Let me throw in a bit of trivia here. His last 2 TKOs were by leg kicks because he did that to Jimmy Flick in, I think, LFA like 6 or 7 years ago. Let me check here. 2014 is the last time he knocked somebody out with punches.
Okay.
So your assessment of kind of a point fighter on the feet, very solid. You know, his punches are there to land.
Except if he's kicking your legs out.
Except if he's kicking your legs, like, you need to do something about it.
That's a good try. Like, has anybody else done like back-to-back wins by kicks, like leg kicks?
Oh yeah,
Pedro Hizzo?
Pat Barry, 3 of his first 4 wins were leg kicks.
Yeah, good call.
I
went heavyweight. I went Pedro Hizzo, but yeah, Pat Barry. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So offensively, he's got some really good striking. Some defensive flaws. He tends to back straight up, which so many MMA fighters do. Very few guys actually cut an angle. That's the most elite guys, like Israel Adesanya does that. Takedown defense is also an issue. You go back to like the Cody Durden fight. He struggled early to get taken down. But what I liked about him is that he didn't panic. He made adjustments, and then he won the last 2 rounds and ended up getting a draw because he did get dominated so early. Batgerel, another really good striker, but the word that just jumps out to me is explosive. Like, he's pedal to the metal, fast, good hand speed, very like in and out movement where he's going to come in, jump in the pocket, blast 3-4 punch combination, try to get back out before getting hit. His straight right is just like his moneymaker. Hard kicks, nice kicks. I like that he'll throw a kick to the head. One thing why I wrote this down in my notes, I've been keeping it in my notes, is something Daniel Cormier pointed out that I really noticed moving forward, is that the reason why he's landing his straight right so well is that he's always winning the foot positioning, where he's always lining his right foot. He's lining his feet up, so his right hand is always coming straight down the pipe. Was really good. Has really good power. I mean, he's coming off 3 straight first round TKO KOs. The only thing I'm concerned about him, obviously, what you talked about, so aggressive, that style, gassing out, and then also going all the way back to the Alatang Haley fight is where he gave up 3 takedowns, which is obviously we haven't seen enough. When you keep knocking guys out in the first round, it's hard to really have a grasp of how good you are on the ground. It was kind of what we used to say about Francis Ngannou. Like, we'd say, "Oh, has he improved his ground game?" I have no idea. He kept knocking guys out in 10 seconds. Now I think we both can answer that and say, yeah, he has. I mean, he won.
Ngannou is now a thing.
Yeah, he won his last fight because of wrestling. This is just a really good battle. Like, it's one of these ones I think hardcore fans gonna like that. Like, not one the casual fan would really jump out of, but I think it's just going to be a really fun X and O fight. I like both guys, especially if we get a full-on striking battle. Gutierrez might be the more technically sound striker, but Batgerel has the power advantage for sure. I think we're in for an absolute war. I'm going to go with the power. I'm going to go with Batgerel. Even though he's been knocking everyone out, Gutierrez is a really hard out to get out there. So I think we're actually going to see a decision.
Awesome. I like the breakdown there. And I like that you raised the questions that there still are about Danaa, but what this fight hinges on for me is that I don't think Gutierrez is likely to make him have to answer those questions. Like if Gutierrez wins this by out wrestling Danaa Bakary soundly and just taking him down over and over again, I will issue a huge mea culpa on the post-fight recap. But I don't see that happening here. I see it kind of like you do, where it's probably going to be primarily a striking battle, and it's going to be the more composed and technical guy who hits for contact rather than power versus the explosive guy that's clearly looking for, kill shots. In the case of Bakary, even the Alateng Haley fight, he lost, and I mean he lost, fairly fair and square. I gave 2 rounds to Alateng, but he didn't really gas out, and it was a moderately high-paced fight, and he did have to spend some time on the ground there. So I feel pretty comfortable about his gas going into this fight against Gutierrez. My only question is whether it goes to a decision or he does find Gutierrez with that power, because I mean the way he swings, I think if he lands the right shot, he can put down anybody in the division. Like he is one of the harder hitters, but I'm going to err on the side of caution here. And I'm with you. Give me Danaa Bakary by decision in this one. Next up at UFC Columbus is a lightweight matchup between Mark Diakiese and Viacheslav Borshchev. Diakiese, the 29-year-old Brit, is 14-5 overall. He is an even 5-5 in the UFC, and he's been a streaky young man. He won 3, then lost 3, won 2, and then lost 2. The most recent 2-fight skid, unanimous decision loss to Rafael Fiziev at UFC Fight Night, Figueiredo versus Benavidez in 2020. Then last November at UFC Fight Night, Holloway versus Rodriguez, he got choked out by Rafael Alves in the first round. He will be taking on Borshchev, one of the more, electrifying recent signees from the Contender Series. The 30-year-old Russian by way of Central California, he's a Team Alpha Male guy, is 6-1 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of the 2021 season of Dana White's Contender Series. And both his Contender Series win and his UFC debut were both, effectively one-punch knockouts. On the Contender Series, he buried Chris Duncan with a short left hook, left him unconscious. And then against Dakota Bush in his UFC debut, he hit him with a body combo, but it was like the left to the liver that just gave you the classic liver shot delayed reaction where Bush backs up and then like 2.5 seconds later just crumples into the ground and has no idea where he was but doesn't want to be there. Yeah, so Borshchev, no, I didn't look at the prop for knockout, so I don't know if people are favoring him to get it done with another one-shot KO, but he certainly is favored to win here. He's minus 190, Diakiese plus 160. Keith, Diakiese's never been knocked out. And, when I think back on his UFC run, it hasn't even really been hurt badly very many times. So if Borshchev wins this, it's either going to look different than what we've seen before out of him, or it's going to be something we haven't seen before out of Diakiese. Like, how do you see this fight playing out? Who wins?
Yeah, this is an interesting battle. Especially on the feet, as you were breaking down their styles. Mark Diakiese is in a really bad situation. Like, he needs to win badly. Like, if he loses, he very well probably going to be on our cut list.
Let me throw in a side note here. He's still floating around the UFC, and I'm always surprised that he's not even 30 yet. But he's been a bust compared to the expectations.
The buzz, yeah.
Yeah, he was 9-0 when he came to the UFC. Top level, like one of the most exciting prospects in the UK at the time. He's 5-5 since, and like you say, he might be fighting for his job.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's not really lost the way most British busts in the UFC lose. We're like, oh, this guy can't wrestle, or but yeah,
They've actually given him a lot of favorable striking matchups, and he's lost them. He's very athletic. He can fight out of both stance. He's fast. He's explosive. His straight right is like his best blow. I like that he goes down to the body. I've said this before, but I'm gonna say it again. I think his power is a little overrated. Now, obviously, he has some power in his hands. I mean, I just said he's explosive. Anytime someone's explosive, they have power, but he is not this knockout image that a lot of people give him credit for. He can actually be gun shy at times, fail to pull a trigger. His calf kicks are phenomenal. They're really his best strength. I like that he throws elbows inside, I like his stepping knees, but doesn't have like a lot of levels to his game where he can change things, change game plan. Like go back to like the Rafael Fiziev fight. Like Fiziev was picking him apart. Never like tried to wrestle. Never did anything other than just stand in range, not match his output, and get picked apart. Not much of an offensive wrestler. Pretty good defensive wrestling. If he gets taken down, he does have a good get-up game. But he was submitted by Rafael Alves in his last fight, which was a new wrinkle in the negatives about him. Now, move over to Borshchev. He's an incredible striker. He's a former K1 kickboxing champion. He's fast. He's explosive. He's accurate. Great jab. Nice tight hooks inside. Good head movement, just sliding his head off center line to land counter shots. Going to the body is one of his top strategies. You talk about like he punished Dakota Bush. Like, yeah, he hit that liver shot at the end of it, but he was punishing it before that. That was just the finish one. Incredible kicks everywhere. Great power. He does have some of those like kickboxing flaws of standing a little too high, standing up a little too straight. He has been rocked before. Go back to his kickboxing days. So, and there is a defensive adjustment for kickboxers in MMA. Obviously, he's been around for a little bit, so he's probably got that. But and I went back to like the Chris Duncan fight. Chris Duncan dropped him with a calf kick, which was surprising. Now, as far as prediction go, I'm picking Borshchev. Diakiese would be smart and wrestle. I highly doubt he does. I mean, he didn't try it against Fiziev. Why would he do it here? I think this fight's going to look very similar to the Fiziev fight, where I expect Borshchev just to pick apart from range, a lot of kicks, a lot of jabs. Give me Borshchev. I'm sorry, I know I butchered his name, by decision.
Yeah, I'm feeling all the same things you are. It's not even that I've given up on Mark Diakiese. It's that I've forgotten how excited I was about his arrival in the UFC. Just, it's been so long that he's become just another dude. And every time I kind of go to look up something about him or preview one of his fights, I'm like, how is he not like 35? It just feels like he's been kind of hanging around the UFC for 10 years. He's not even 30 yet. So there's every possibility he could make a big turnaround. I mean, we're going to talk about Matt Brown up this card. Matt Brown's record looks like crap, and it's always looked like crap. And yet he was one fight away for fighting for a title in one of the toughest divisions in the sport. Like, it's possible to make a turnaround in this sport in your 30s. Just
hey, Jorge Masvidal became one of the biggest stars in the sport with a bad record.
There you are. That's but all of his avenues to victory against Borshchev here really would depend on him fighting to his best advantage. And as you pointed out, he just never really does that. The biggest thing that it kind of hinges on, and you pointed it out, Borshchev has shown himself to be vulnerable to leg kicks. Diakiese has them. They're his one weapon that you never go, man, I wish you'd pull the trigger on that more often, because he actually does, throw them pretty consistently. So I think that might bother Borshchev, but Borshchev might also just take one of those and counter him over the top and just put his lights out. Like I said off the top of this segment, that Diakiese's never been knocked out, and for the most part, he hasn't really even been hurt badly. At least by punches upstairs. I think that happens here. Borshchev has fantastic accuracy, fight-changing power. It might not be just the one-shot walk-off thing, but I think Borshchev is going to hurt him. He's going to give chase, and he's going to be able to finish this. Give me Borshchev to keep the streak and the hype train going with a second-round TKO. Next up, it is the welterweights as Neil Magny takes on Max Griffin. Magny, the 34-year-old American, is 25-8 overall. He is 18-7 since joining the UFC out of the 16th season of the Ultimate Fighter. He is at this point by far the most accomplished member of that season. Came out as just another guy, and now he is the guy. However, he currently he is coming off a win. I forgot. He came back and beat Jeff Neal by unanimous decision last May at UFC Fight Night, Rodriguez versus Watterson. That got out the taste of kind of an ugly loss to Michael Chiesa last January. Prior to that, he had been on a 3-fight win streak over Li Jingliang, Anthony Rocco Martin, and Robbie Lawler, that had him well into the top 10, and he's looking to keep that momentum going against Griffin. Griffin, the 36-year-old Californian, is 18-8 overall. He is an even 6-6 in the UFC. You have a lot of people in this card that are 500 in the UFC coming into this. He is on a 3-fight win streak, though. He had a rough run there. I mean, at one point he was 3-6 in the UFC and could easily have been fighting for his job against Ramiz Brahimaj back in November of 2020. But he beat Brahimaj. That was the fight where Brahimaj's ear came off. But I mean, worth mentioning that Griffin might have been winning the fight anyway. At the time, it was very competitive. Then knocked out Kenan Song in March of last year, and most recently beat Carlos Condit by unanimous decision last July at UFC 264. So Griffin will try to keep the longest win streak of his UFC run going, but he is not favored to do so. He is plus 170, Magny minus 200 as the favorite. Keith, we have two guys that in their own way are, kind of unexpected success stories. I would not have guessed that Neil Magny would still be in the UFC, let alone kind of hanging around the top 15 in 2022. Yet here he is, and arguably fighting as well as he ever has. And then Griffin, a guy that I didn't think he'd still be in the UFC in 2022. Like, I picked him to lose to Ramiz Brahimaj, and I would have had him on my cut list. And here he is on a 3-fight win streak. Who wins?
Yeah. I think the fans are going to win in this one because this is going to be a really fun fight based on both their styles. Neil Magny, he is an incredible overachiever, and that's because he's in, like, we talk about who has the best, who is this. He's getting in the club, as we say, in best output, best cardio. I mean, he's in that thing. His cardio is truly his best attribute. He is the ultimate builder where he just picks it up we talk about guys pick up round. He picks up like minute by minute. Every minute is more output. He's so long and lengthy. He's good at either doing two things, and he understands it well. Either keeping a pressure game where he's backing the guy up but keeping him on the end of his punches, or pressing all the way into the pocket where he uses his height to get in the clinch. He will just touch on the feet, no tells, just works a long jab. Then I love that he'll close the distance, crash the pocket with those knees. It's so easy for him to step in knees because Howland just stand next to the opponent. His knees are to their freaking belly button anyway. So just a couple more inches and he's landing shots. He has some of the best calf kicks you'll see. I mean, go back to the Anthony Rocco Martin fight, tore him up with the calf kicks. Good clinch striker, especially those in close, just short elbows, short knees, shoulder strikes, everything. He's such an underrated offensive wrestler, and he gets a lot of takedowns. However, he struggles to stop takedowns against better wrestlers. Like if you're a weaker wrestler, you're not gonna take him down. But if you're a good wrestler, RDA, Michael Chiesa may turn him into a takedown dummy. Now Griffin. The reason why I said this matchup is fun style. Let's say Griffin, his biggest strength, in my opinion, is probably his cardio too and his output. He's well-rounded, pressure striker, technically sound, fights behind a high guard. Everything stays tight. Busy jab. His straight right is accurate, though he does headhunt a little bit to my liking. I wish he'd throw more kicks and go to the body. But he's really shown lately to show some power that I didn't think he had. He mixes in some takedowns that I wouldn't call him a powerful wrestler. As far as prediction goes, Griffin has cardio and is always ready for war, but Magny has different level cardio, something that Griffin is probably never experienced. I've learned over the years picking Neil Magny fights that Magny only loses the top guys in the division. I don't think Griffin is a top guy in the division. Give me Magny by decision.
Why would I add anything to that? Like, there you go. Magny is better at everything Griffin does well, I think, except maybe one punch power. But it's not like Griffin's one punch power is so great that it makes it like it's not like Santiago Ponzinibbio. Like it's not like Max Griffin has like an equalizer. He just has, you know, probably a little bit better power from one strike to the next. But you're right. Like in order to beat Neil Magny, unless you go all the way back to like losing to like Seth Patinsky 8 years ago or whatever, you either have to catch him quickly before he starts rolling downhill, like Lorenz Larkin just lit him up from the opening bell, or you basically have to be like a top 10, if not top 5 guy. You have to be Michael Chiesa, Rafael dos Anjos, Damian Maia. Max Griffin has turned around into kind of a nice story and a nice resurgence in the UFC, but he is none of those people, and he's none of those things. So, I mean, it feels like a safe bet to me. Just, yeah, Magny by decision. You know, I'm not offering betting advice, but if I were betting on this, taking Magny at minus 200, might as well take the prop by decision. But yeah, there you go. 2 for Magny by decision. Next up, it is the flyweights as Jennifer Maia takes on Manon Fiorot. Maia, the 33-year-old Brazilian, is 19-8-1 overall. She is 4-3 since joining the UFC as the outgoing Invicta flyweight champ. She is, of course, a former UFC flyweight title challenger. She faced Valentina Shevchenko at UFC 255 back in November of 2020. And she was kind of the beginning of the narrative of the moral victory against Valentina Shevchenko. Like, you know, where, you know, some people gave her a round in that fight, and just by not being instantly obliterated, people, you know, kind of started looking for gaps in Shevchenko's armor, even though it was a completely dominant win for the champ. Anyway, that's not Maia's fault. Since then, she has won a unanimous decision over Jessica Ai. That was last July. And then she fought just back in January of this year, losing a unanimous decision to Caitlin Chookagian. That was at UFC Fight Night, Kattar versus Chikadze. She'll be taking on Fiorot. The 32-year-old French boxer is 8-1 overall. She's a perfect 3-0 in the UFC. Made her debut last January, beat Victoria Leonardo by TKO in the second round, then knocked out Tabitha Ricci in the second round last June, and most recently at UFC Fight Night Ladd versus Dumont last October, she took a unanimous decision over Mayra Bueno Silva. She had been scheduled to fight just a couple weeks ago on March 5th. She was scheduled to fight Jessica Ai. That fight was canceled due to an eye injury. Get it? She goes back on the shelf for a couple of weeks, and she's now fighting Maia. She is also an overwhelming favorite, one of the bigger favorites on the card. Fiorot is right now minus 325, Maia plus 250. Keith, you and I are both believers in Manon Fiorot. I mean, it took me a little longer to get there. I will never stop self-owning about saying that Victoria Leonardo, was going to beat Manon Fiorot, but I learned my lesson quickly. But even I'm a little surprised that she is this big a favorite over such a solid competitor as Jennifer Maia.
The best part of you saying that is you saying like, yeah, I picked Victoria Leonardo to beat Manon Fiorot the exact time your son walked by and it was like leaving. Like, yep. That's it, Dad. I can't take it anymore.
I'm getting disowned by my own family for that pick. I mean, he probably lit something on fire back there. Like,
you said what? I can't live in a house with that.
Exactly. I don't blame him one bit. But I mean, to be a greater than 3-1 favorite over as solid a competitor as Jennifer Maia, that did kind of surprise me.
Yeah, that's pretty shocking.
Like, tell me how you see this fight playing out, because those odds tell me that, odds makers and obviously the bettors who are driving those lines to where they are believe that Fiorot is about to take her place with Caitlin Chookagian, Valentina Shevchenko, Liz Carmouche, all the women that have beaten Jennifer Maia in the UFC. They're not top 10 fighters. They're like top 3 fighters. Like, Caitlin Chookagian was probably the second best flyweight in the world when she beat Maia both times. Liz Carmouche was probably the second best flyweight in the world when she beat her. And Shevchenko was the champ and maybe the most dominant pound for pound fighter in the sport. And we're saying that Manon Fiorot is going to join that group.
Yeah, and the people are saying it like that's not this. She's not a favorite, negative 130. I mean, she's negative, what would you say, 300? Like that's
350.
350.
Or sorry, 325. 325.
325. Yeah, that line is a little off. So we're so high on Manon Fiorot. Like when they removed her from UFC 272, we still made a prediction. She even have an opponent, and we're still talking about Manon Fiorot
because it didn't matter. We both said whoever they replace her with, the pick is the same.
Yeah, like she was gonna smash them.
Yeah.
I didn't expect her to get Jennifer Maia because again, this is a huge step up in competition. I mean, she's well rounded. She's a boxer, throws straight punches down the pipe. She attacks with combos. She has a very hold your ground, bite down your mouthpiece style. This works well if someone is willing to throw down in the pocket with her. This relies on her really trying to pick up the timing of attacks. The negative of that is it makes her a stationary target. She's a bit flat-footed, not a great athlete, and she struggles with movement. We talked about this before. That's why Caitlin Chikagian beat her so easily. She struggled with Caitlin Chikagian because she just couldn't catch up to her. So if she can get inside, she's strong in the clinch. She's a very strong woman. Good dirty boxing. I'd say okay takedowns, but very good takedown defense. And she's a legit submission threat if he goes to the ground. Now, Fiorot, I'm gonna say exactly the same thing I said last time. Nothing changed. I didn't change my notes because she didn't fight. Southpaw, fast hands, very technically sound. Nice pop on her strikes. Good movement. Good footwork. Can land strikes if she's getting pressured while being backed up. Good at cutting different angles. Can have times when she has low output, which I don't like, especially against someone like Maia, who usually has really good output. But she's got some really good kicks. I like her teep kicks. I like her push kicks. She will add in takedowns with her striking. Nice entries. Good top control. Heavy top pressure. As far as prediction goes, this, as we mentioned, this is a huge step up in competition for Fiorot. I'm not as confident as the Vegas lines are. However, I'm taking her to strive. I think she's going to use her movement really well. I think that's going to, she'll use her movement to avoid Maia's strikes, then respond with vicious blows, just being the better athlete, having the speed advantage, being the length advantage. Maia's so tough to finish, and so I don't think she'll get finished. But I like Fiorot and a lopsided decision.
I'm with you here. As much as I like Fiorot in this matchup, it's tough to pick her to do in 3 rounds what Valentina Shevchenko couldn't do in 5. And while she beat up Maia good, we weren't close to a knockout at any point in the fight. Really, she just outstruck her and beat her up for 5 rounds. I wouldn't be totally surprised if Fiorot caught her. Her power is numbing. You can tell in both the Leonardo fights and the Tabitha Ricci fight. The first time she landed flush on them, they didn't like it, and it was the old Mike Tyson. Everybody's got a game plan until they get punched in the mouth. It changed their approach to the fight, and she finished them both. But I'm not picking that to happen here. I am picking Fiorot to win a fairly dominant decision. Next up is the obligatory heavyweight slobber knocker of UFC Fight Night, Blaydes versus Daukaus. Only there probably won't be a whole lot of slobber knocked. I don't even get to say now that it's the UFC's oldest heavyweight against the UFC's shortest heavyweight because, damn it, Chris Barnett is in the UFC now. But it is the UFC's oldest heavyweight and I think oldest fighter, period, against a dude who's really damn short to be a heavyweight. It is Alexey Oleynik. It is Ilir Latifi. We're going to bust through this sucker. Latifi.
Man, sorry to interrupt you. Volkov's the tallest heavyweight, right? There's no one taller than him, right?
In the UFC right now? He's the tallest in the UFC, yeah.
Stefan Struve isn't around anymore.
Stefan Struve's gone.
So we don't know. So we're taping this before the Aspinall versus Volkov fight. If Volkov loses, he needs to obviously get a step down in competition. Just go crazy. Just give him Chris Barnett. Just do it. Fuck it.
I love it. Be like Pat Barry versus Stefan Struve again.
Yeah, come on. Chris Barnett's little spinning wheel kick is all fun and shit, but come on, dude. He's not good. Just for the face off of Barnett and Volkov. That's it.
I'm so here
It's
for
even
it.
better. It'd be even better if he didn't look up and he just looked straight. It's
Just
like,
look straight his belly button.
all right, carry on.
Ugh,
Carry on. I'm sorry to interrupt your intro. Sorry.
no, that's fantastic. I needed something to wake me up here. Ilir Latifi, 38-year-old Swede, is 15-8 with one no contest overall. He is 9-5 in the UFC. He is 1-1 since making the decision to move up to heavyweight in 2020. He lost his heavyweight debut against Derek Lewis back in February of 2020. Came back last June and won a split decision over Tanner Boser at UFC Fight Night Rosenstrike versus Sakai. He'll be taking on Oleynik, the 44-year-old Russian. The 44-year-old Russian is 59, 16-1 overall. Yes, you heard that right. He is 8-7 in the UFC. He is on a 3-fight losing streak. He has lost to Lewis, who knocked him out in August of 2020, Chris Daukaus, your headliner this weekend, who knocked him out in February of 2021, and Sergey Spivak, who stepped in on short notice and won a unanimous decision over him at UFC on ESPN Korean Zombie versus Ige in June. Odds on this one are fairly close. Latifi, the slight favorite. He's minus 150 right now. Oleynik around plus 125. Obviously, Keith, Alexey Oleynik is in decline. You know, the amazing thing about him, even just 3 or 4 years ago, was, you know, he was still fairly elusive on the feet. I mean, the way he got to have like a 70-fight career was, you know, he managed to work his way through heavyweight where just about everyone has power without getting hit cleanly very often. You know, he just managed to work out a striking game that kept him from getting clocked too often. That's gone. The chin is gone. You know, I think I watched it happen. It was the only interesting thing that happened at UFC Fight Night Dos Anjos versus Edwards in San Antonio in 2019 was when Walt Harris like kneed him in the chin in like 12 seconds. Since then, it's been rough sledding. He's not. I mean, the win over Fabricio Verdum is going to go down as probably his last great win. You know, but since then his chin is gone. He's looked really slow. Like he's starting to look, you know, 44. The gas tank is not his friend anymore. And this isn't the same UFC heavyweight division it was when he got here. Like there's a youth movement going on and the guys coming up are more skilled. Like there are a few guys left in the UFC that he could probably nail a standing Ezekiel choke on like he did Junior Albini, but there's not many of them and he's not getting them. He's probably fighting for his job here. And it's actually a pretty winnable fight in Latifi. Like Latifi doesn't have lights out power. He doesn't throw much volume. He certainly could wrestle Oleynik. I mean, he's a good wrestler. He was a very good wrestler at 205. He's still a good wrestler at heavyweight. He could wrestle Oleynik, but I think he's smart enough to know that that's actually playing into Oleynik's best chances to beat him. I think we're going to get kind of a lousy kickboxing match conducted almost entirely on the feet. And I'm actually taking Oleynik here. I think he's going to throw more volume than Latifi. Latifi probably has a power advantage, but maybe not enough of one. And I don't think it's going to go to the ground very much. And if it does, I think both guys are probably going to want to get back up as quickly as possible. So give me Alexey Oleynik by decision in a lousy fight. And he keeps his job if he wants it. Maybe he retires. Who knows?
Yeah, that I would love that. There's a very good chance he just gets the Ezekiel choke on Latifi, but if he was a stand-up battle, that'd be even better. It's funny you mentioned Alexey Oleynik being 44 years old. I'm like, Alexey Oleynik is pretty much the same age as Tom Brady. Like, what the hell? Just look at those two guys. I mean, I'm pretty sure Tom Brady has like Benjamin Button disease, but like, are we sure Alexey Oleynik is 44 and he's not like
54?
Yeah, yeah. It was fun when Alexey Oleynik was on this like little run. It was fun, but we all knew it was gonna end and how it was gonna end, and it was gonna end with him getting knocked out by Sergey Spivak and Walt Harris and all these guys. He's still like he's just. So on the feet, you're picking him to win a stand-up battle. Like I totally could see it too. He's very unorthodox. He has this like wild but somewhat effective style. He has this surprising power as his old man strength. He always dips to like he has this like I'm dipping to one side and throwing on the other side and like I'm waiting for like a Mirko Cro Cop high kick on that side. I love that he. I think I described it last time like big brothers. His opponents like you just grab him by the back of the head and just like dirty box him and like just swing it like when I play around with my son like swing him around by the back of the head. A lot of my notes are the very same as like I'm like he's 75 fights in whatever it is like how much has he changed? But his chin. I mean, you're talking about years and years of damage. Recent knockouts. I mean, Walt Harris, Derek Lewis knocked him out. We mentioned Sergey Spivak. They're all falling the chin. I mean, Spivak was it on the ground too, wasn't it?
Well, on Spivak, it did go to decision, but Spivak. And
wait, Spivak going to decision?
Yeah, like Daukaus and Lewis both knocked him out. Spivak went to decision.
Why am I thinking that Spivak was punching him out? All right, I apologize for that. Maybe he should have won by knockout. Good. So he's still a pretty good wrestler. Like he's tricky, he's crafty. You get in there, body lock takedowns. But good reverses if he's on his back. But he's a submission threat. 46 subs in his career. He's got the Ezekiel choke. He also like if he's on top of like a headlock or like what some people call a scarf choke.
Yep.
He's also hard to submit. I mean, like, you go back to like the Fabricio Verdum was probably the greatest heavyweight grappler in history. He couldn't submit him, and that was somewhat recently ago. I mean, might say a little bit more about Verdum at this point than Oleynik, but still pretty impressive. Latifi, he's one of these guys that's like there's not a lot of notes you can take on him, and he's extremely undersized. He's only 5'10", but he moves pretty well.
It's a generous 5'10".
Yeah. I'm 5'8". I'm pretty sure I might be the same height as Latifi. I got a big head too. Like we both might have the same size. He moves pretty well at heavyweight. He's fast considering he's an undersized light heavyweight. But you look at Latifi and you think he'd carry power, and he just doesn't. Like he doesn't have power, especially moving up to heavyweight. He's a good but not a great wrestler. Like he gets a lot of takedowns from like just catching kicks, and cardio has been an issue. I mean, like we go back to when he was light heavyweight, he gassed out against Corey Anderson, gassed out against Volkan Oezdemir. Though he did, I don't want to see he didn't gas out against Derek Lewis and Tanner Boser. Like that's not what he. I mean, he beat Tanner Boser, but
I gassed out watching those fights. Those fights were both so bad.
Yeah, but I mean, like, what I mean by that is like he was still going hard at 15th round. It just was like lower level talent heavyweights bad. So I truly believe Alexey Oleynik is the better fighter than Latifi at this point. I think he's probably the better striker. Not the athlete, obviously, but obviously the grappler, probably the better wrestler. I just don't trust like his chin at all. Latifi doesn't have the power, but if he gets on top, if Oleynik, tries guard, finds himself on bottom and tries throwing up that Ezekiel choke, yeah, very good chance he gets it. But Oleynik on top of him, dropping ground and pound on that chin, I just don't know if it holds up. 1 year ago, I probably would pick Oleynik. Now, this is my Sarah McMahon pick where it's like I know this is the wrong pick, but yeah, I'm giving Latifi by first round TKO ground and pound.
There you go. A little bit more dissension on the UFC Columbus preview. Next up, the welterweights take the cage as it is Matt the Immortal Brown versus Bryan Bam Bam Barberena. Brown, the 41-year-old Ohio native, is 23-18 overall. He is 16-12 since joining the UFC out of the 7th season of The Ultimate Fighter. Like Magny that we talked about elsewhere in this card, he is now the runaway star of the 7th season of Tough. I mean, that's the one that was won by Amir Sadallah. So, there you go. He won his last time out. Knocked out Diego Lima in the second round. That put the Skids on a 2-fight losing streak against Miguel Baeza and Carlos Condit. He'll be taking on Barberena. The 32-year-old Minnesota native training out of Arizona is 16-8 overall. He is 7-6 in the UFC. He is coming off a unanimous decision win over Darian Weeks last December at UFC Fight Night versus Aldo. Prior to that, he lost a majority decision to Jason Witt last July. This one, at least as of 9 or 10 days out from Fight Night, is a dead pick'em. Both men -110. Keith, I'm going to give my prediction for this fight first, but first I'm going to ask you the bonus question. We have a family rivalry type thing going on here because Matt Brown has beaten both Lima brothers and Bryan Barberena has beaten both Ellenberger brothers. Which is more impressive?
Beating the Lima brothers.
I tend to agree, even though he beat Douglas Lima before Lima was Lima.
Yeah.
He beat Diego Lima after Lima was actually Diego was pretty good. So it kind of evens out.
Yeah, and Ellenberger at one point, Jake Ellenberger was a really good win at one point.
But he was on the downslope by the time Barberena beat him, and Joe Ellenberger was never really that good.
No.
Yeah. So
and even though Diego Lima is never that good, that's a much better win than Joe Ellenberger.
Yeah, I'm with you. And Douglas Lima again, it was pretty early in both their careers, but
yeah.
It's certainly aged well. Anyway, this fight, you and I, we've been recording most of our in-between chatter so far tonight, but off air, you mentioned that it's hard to get too up for this fight. We know why it's on the card. It's pretty much a guaranteed action fight, but beyond that, I guess it has implications for these guys' own careers, but not a whole lot of implications for the division. Matt Brown, his competitive peak was like 2013, 2014 when he was actually in the title picture for a hot minute and was he was the most feared guy in the division. And that was a division that had Robbie Lawler in it. That was just the year that Matt Brown was a killer, but that was 2014. And Barberena, he was a fun action fighter in that kind of same, Nico Price, Randy Brown, Alex Morono mold, but he's on a lower level than those guys. He's never even really scared the top 15. So yeah, divisional implications not long in this fight. As far as the promise of action, if it's going to happen, I think it needs to happen fast. Matt Brown is the striking version of what Jim Miller is now, because he's the same Matt Brown, just a little bit slower, and you got about 5 minutes. He was doing fine in the Miguel Baeza fight for the first round. It was a wild back and forth round. Either of the guys probably, they both had momentum, both hurt the other real bad. But by the time they came out for the second round, Baeza had plenty left in the tank and Brown had nothing. So Brown's got 5 minutes to do his thing. Barberena is trending in that direction. He's an old 32. You pointed out ahead of one of his last couple of fights, I don't think I agreed with you at the time, but I have come to agree, his chin is gone. And his fight style was always going to live and die with his chin because he is a pure brawler. His ideal fight is taking one to give one, maybe taking two to give one because, he believes in his power, and it's carried him as far as it has, but that's a bad place to be in against Matt Brown. And I'll say this sometimes about certain matchups. I think Bryan Barberena is about the best fighter that I feel this confident for Matt Brown to beat in the UFC right now. That's my call there is it's a pick 'em. I understand why it's a pick 'em because you can't believe too much in either guy right now. But you line up people that Matt Brown would be a pick 'em against in the UFC welterweight division right now. Bryan Barberena is top of the food chain of those guys. And I feel I feel pretty confident, picking him here. I think this is going to be a wild fight. Both these guys know why they're here. I think they're going to both come out, guns blazing. Matt Brown takes a little bit of a feeling out process, but not much of one. Usually 90 seconds into the first round, he's throwing things with intent, or he's doing his thing that he still does that even as slow on his feet as he is, he's pretty good at corralling guys into the fence with footwork where he can, set them up for, his kicks from one side, his punches from the other. I think Barberena is going to fall right into that. He knows why he's here. He's here to put on an action fight, and I think he's going to go out on the shield. My second most likely chance is that Barberena knocks out Brown in the second. But, picking between those two, I think it's a little more likely that Brown finds the target. Barberena has always been hittable. Power's the last thing to go. Give me Matt Brown by first round knockout. and maybe he retires in front of the hometown fans? Please.
Yeah, so you have a lot of factors in this fight that makes me want to take Matt Brown. The first thing is you mentioned, it's being in Ohio. Like that, not that I don't think this fight is going down to a decision, so that's not what I'm saying. But just like those, the momentum, the whole crowd cheering for you and everything. The problem is I'm just kind of done with Matt Brown. And I know you said that I said I'm not really interested in this fight. Like, I mean, under no condition saying this is not going to be a fun affair. It's going to be fun. They're going to be throwing bombs at each other. Matt Brown. I also understand Matt Brown deserves this moment. Like you could argue it could be the co-main event because.
And I mean, for what it's worth, like COVID probably postponed because he had been talking about getting on a card in Ohio and stopped just short of saying that might be my last bow out.
Well, he did retire at one point. Remember? He retired.
Then
came back. Yeah, he announced that he retired. I forget which fight it was.
Oh, you're right. Back. You're right. Thank you.
Yeah. So I just the fights need to matter to me. Like obviously I watch every fight. I still like fights that don't matter that are great fights. I understand that. But I mean he was always more like ferocious than technical. He was never great. I mean, I'm talking about prime Matt Brown. He was never a great athlete. He always had a lot of technical issues, always kept his chin high. He never checked leg kicks. Now you add in that he's 40 plus years old, who's taken on his fighting style that bet in brawls. He's fought some of the best guys in the division. We always have to mention that who knows what he did to his body with the drug use, which he's open about. He's been hurt to the body. It's always been a weakness going down to his body. And his chin is very questionable. I mean, you mentioned him getting rocked by Miguel Baeza, hurt by Carlos Condon. I don't like those things. But some of the things he still does, he still is a violent dude. He still marches forward. He still has that old man power. He still sits on his punches. I mean, he knocked Diego Lima out cold. He likes those in close elbows, some dirty clinch striking. Can sneak in a takedown. Nice trips, body locks, violent ground and pound. He's on top. I'd say he's probably still a decent defensive wrestler, though. I think Carlos took him down a couple times. However, his grappling is really weak. Like he's not much of a submission threat. He was out grappled by Carlos fairly easily. I also think his power is good, but I think it's a little overrated. He knocked out Diego Lima, and he had that like crushing knockout of Diego Sanchez. But those are also like Diego Sanchez was pretty much done, and Diego Lima, as we mentioned, has never been a great win for anybody. Move over to Barberena, southpaw, a weak athlete, but he makes up for it with just pure toughness. Though he probably has lost a step and he's gotten a little bit slower. I mean, I think the Jason Wood fight is probably the best example of that recently. And I think we both knew that day was going to come where just the bottom fell out on him and it was going to be overnight. And I think we're in that. But he's still going to bring the fight. He's going to have a high output. He always has great cardio. He's a pressure counter striker with a slip and rip style. He likes knees and elbows inside. He can go to the body. He can get takedowns, good ground and pound. He's a submission threat. He loves like head attacks, Darce chokes, guillotines, stuff like that. But he's a very weak defensive wrestler. I mean, Jason Wood took him down at ease. Anthony Ivy took him down a bunch of times. So as far as prediction goes, I have no clue who's going to win this fight. I mean, it's really Brown's power versus Barbereno's output and cardio. I think both guys are pretty much shot. It's one of those ones like you almost want to, like if you're a gambler, you either bet like Brown early or you bet Barberena late. You kind of like hedge your bets. I would really bet on the fence. Like I don't know who to pick. Do you think Brown can catch a knockout in the first 5 minutes, if can Barberena survive the first 5 minutes and start working takedowns and output and forcing Brown back? I think your breakdown was perfect on basically assessing both these guys. When this fight first was announced, I said Brown's probably gonna knock out. And then I started thinking, oh, his power's over. I'm just honestly, I know I'm just rambling right now because I don't want to make a pick. Okay, let's take Brown with a 10-8 round in the first, and then Barberena wins the next 2 rounds. We get a draw. No,
Oh,
no, I won't do that. I'm gonna take Barberena. I'm gonna say somehow he survives and then he wins the last 2 rounds. But like, if we were ranking on the scale of confidence 1 through 10, this is a -1 confidence.
which is, I mean, as it should be for a pick and fight.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Yeah. Like people who are putting money on this fight, like shut up. You don't know. Like, you're just a degenerate. You know.
Okay, we head to the flyweight division. It is a matchup between Askar Askarov and Kai Kara-France. Normally, before a card, I ask you, or at least think to myself as I'm thinking about the card, who on this card is closest to a title shot in their respective division? And for most fight nights, it is the main event winner. That's how they're structured. But because of the reasons we talked about, Curtis Blaydes kind of having that problem. I think the winner of this fight between Askar Askarov and Kai Kara-France is probably the closest to a title shot of anybody on the card. And I think you even said that. Like you said, this might be a title eliminator, depending on how.
Let me ask you this. Can I ask you this? We always ask this question: who does the UFC want to win? You have the guy with the undefeated record who has a draw with Brandon Moreno, especially if Brandon Moreno somehow they do a fourth fight and Brandon Moreno wins the title. But he's technically undefeated. There's some marketing issues. One being Russian, doesn't speak English. He also has like that.
He's deaf,
partially deaf thing going. Yeah. So obviously that I know he speaks. It's weird. Yeah. It's not like Matt Hamill, but he's got something going on that. And then you got Kai Kara-France, who doesn't have the best record, but lately he's looked spectacular. He's way more marketable. He can sell. He's been talking. Yeah. And talking, I mean, as in trash talking, not that. Yeah. I wasn't saying that he can talk. Yeah. But the trash.
He recovered from his stroke, learned to speak again, and
yeah. So, who do you think the UFC wants to win that matchup?
I imagine the UFC would want Kai Kara-France to win this. Because he doesn't just talk. Like, he's become kind of charismatic and engaging.
That's what I mean.
Like, cocky New Zealanders are kind of a hot ticket right now. Versus
more exciting style.
More exciting versus Askarov, who, he's Russian. And, specifically he's Dagestani, like he's a former ACB champ. He doesn't speak English basically at all. Yeah, like I'm sure from a marketing standpoint, they'd love to have Kai Kara-France win. Unfortunately, we'll get to the odds in a minute, and it's not looking that way, at least according to the bookmakers. But first, let's meet these gentlemen. Askarov, the 29-year-old Dagestani. I always trip over that because he looks 37. He is 14-0-1 overall. He is 3-0-1 since joining the UFC as a former ACB, now ACA flyweight champ. He had a split draw in his debut against future champ Brandon Moreno. Since then, he's been perfect, winning unanimous decisions over Tim Elliott, Alexandre Pantoja, and most recently, Joseph Benavidez, whom he beat at UFC 259 last March. He is taking on Kai Kara-France. The 28-year-old New Zealander is 23-9 with 1 no contest. He is 6-2 in the UFC. He's on a 2-fight winning streak, those two being Rogerio Bontorin, whom he beat last March, and Cody Garbrandt, whom he knocked out last December at UFC 269. It's a first-round knockout, and Keith and I talked about it being another example of Cody Garbrandt being a guy that gets drawn into brawls, sometimes to his detriment. Worth noting that Kai Kara-France, he's 6-2 in the UFC, and his only losses are to Brandon Moreno and Brandon Royval. So he wandered kind of in the hinterlands for a long time, like Oceania, Pacific promotions. I mean, he has, he got 33 fights, for a 28-year-old guy, and never fought in China for a long time, like in WLF. Arrived in the UFC kind of later than I expected, but now has done better than I expected. Nonetheless, he is a pretty substantial underdog here. He is plus 240, Askarov around minus 300. Keith, I mean, we talked about who the marketing people at the UFC would probably like to have win this. Who do you think does win it, and how?
Well, It's a close fight. Like, I'm surprised the odds are that big, especially the way Kara-France is fighting right now. Like, I'm not surprised that Askarov and are undefeated. He has some really good wins. I'm not surprised that he's a favorite. I'm just surprised how big of a favorite he is. Kara-France, I mean, he's a well-rounded fighter. He's a good striker. He's really good at the basics. Like, that's what just stands out to me. Busy jab, straight punches down the pipe. I love his straight right. He has good accuracy, good combos. Good head movement. He has very slip out of range style, fire back with combinations, bounces his head off the center line, but always kind of keep himself in that range where you can kind of avoid but still land. Has back-to-back brutal KO wins at flyweight, which not many people can say. I mean, he's showing that he's the big puncher in that division right now. He had Cody Garbrandt hurt, and what I liked about it is that he didn't rush the takedown, rush the knockout and get hurt or taken down. He kind of like pressured, but in a controlled sense. So he was seeing all the shots he was throwing, which showed a really high intelligence. He has a high guard defense. I like that he has that dipping to one side, Robert Whittaker high kick going for him. Good calf kicks. One of the only negatives on the feet I really seen is going back all the way to the Brandon Moreno fight, is where he was getting pressured and forced to fight off his back foot, which is something he doesn't like to do. But he actually has some really good success against Brandon Moreno at times, which is all you have to know about his skill set. Now, he isn't a powerful wrestler, but he's good at scrambling. Like, he might not look to start a takedown, but he will win a scramble and end up on top. He also has a scramble takedown defense to him, where instead of sprawling, he looks for switches and spladles. It kind of goes back to that funk style we were just talking about. You see that like funk wrestlers. Though the one thing that stands out to me is that he was recently submitted by Brandon Royval on the ground. Now, Askarov, southpaw, he kind of fights out of both stances. He has a very like awkward striking style, very similar to like Tim Elliott. But it works for him, and he throws a lot of hard kicks, and he lands a lot more than you'd expect for someone who has kind of an ugly style to striking. And I think that kind of has that Colby Covington effect, where people are so concerned about the wrestling and the takedown that they start dropping their hands. I mean, I tell people like people were complaining about Colby Covington, like if you were casual and you're like, oh, watch Colby Covington wrestle, and then they really it's just like, oh, he was too scared to strike with Masvidal, and you're like, what are you talking about? He
outstruck Masvidal.
He won the striking.
Yeah.
Other than 1 millisecond where he got dropped to his knee, didn't even go all the way down. But my point is, the reason why is Masvidal was at one point was actually keeping his hands low and dropping. Like every time Colby went to come in, the guy would drop his hands, expecting a shot. And that's kind of what happens with Askarov, is he lands the shots because people aren't expecting it. Now, defensively, he makes the mistake of backing straight up. He'll actually like put himself against the cage, but I think he's so comfortable with his takedowns. He actually like used it to kind of force, like almost get the person to come at him a little bit. They can like he's in trouble, but also gives him the entire cage where he can just drive through the hips, and he's like, the person can't like wall walk and everything. Obviously, when he's shooting his hip, he's got really great entries. Besides, like the speed of the entries is just like relentlessness of it. Like he'll shoot 30 times, and a perfect example of like wrestling is watching what Khabib Nurmagomedov did to Conor in that, like, remember the first shot that Khabib did in the very beginning of the fight, and Conor like kind of stopped it and was like in a good position. He was almost going for like a butt scoot and everything, and Khabib kept like reshooting it and just gaining an inch every time, gaining a little step. That's what Askarov does. Like his first shot is not necessarily like, think about like football. Like he's not getting the 10 yards in one move. He's getting the
3 yards in a cloud of dust,
and then the 2 yards, and then the 3 yards, and now it's 4th and 1, and then he finally finishes the takedown. Like that's what his takedowns are, just getting the inches and winning it slowly in the scrambles. But if he gets he gets his arm behind your leg, he's got this, like, even though he doesn't look like the guy who's so strong, but he has this base with him, and he can just like scoop up a leg, get like a single, and just rise it up, do what they call like when they pull the leg out, they kind of bring it up, they call it like a high riser. A lot of different colleges call it different names, but in absolute smothering top control and hard to submit. I mean, he went against Pantoja, throwing up submissions off his back nonstop and fought out of some really good submissions. Now, it's funny that the odds just favor Askarov so much because I wouldn't say I'm torn, but I definitely see a Kara France having an avenue for victory. I mean, that's just catching a big shot. He's the better all-around fighter, and he's looked sensational lately. But I'm taking Askarov. I'm kind of feeling like I'm leaning with a specialist there. I'm seeing him just doing what he does and get takedowns, get it over again, and that like funk style of Kara France, I actually think it's going to hurt him because the traditional sprawling through your hips, like the funk style works against. Obviously, I'm not talking when I say funk style. I'm not talking about NCAA funk wrestlers. I'm not talking that. I mean the switches, the splados, that shit works very good against junior high level wrestlers, not Askarov level. He's going to be too good. He'll control the hips. He'll Navy ride and stuff like this over, and he'll win those positions. And I think he just wins unanimous decision.
I like your breakdown there, and I like you pointing out that Kara France has tons of ceiling. He's developed into like such a better and more complete fighter than I thought he was going to be. He's started to flash the kind of one-shot power that's extremely rare in that division. In fact, he might be the division's top power merchant right now, depending on whether you like, him or Davison Figueiredo better. But Askarov's advantage in one area, I think, is going to be enough to overcome all of that. Because, I mean, I'm tipping my hand a little bit here, to how I'm going to talk about the main event. But to me, it boils down to, does Kara France have enough one-shot power to like make Askarov pay in a fight-changing way for his first blown takedown? And I'm not betting on that. And I think once Askarov gets Kara France down, I agree that Kara France's tendency to try to initiate scrambles is not going to work to his benefit. I think once Askarov is on top, things are going to kind of start rolling downhill. He has the very Dagestani thing of it is miserable to be defending his takedowns, and it's even more miserable when he's on top of you. I expect he's going to kind of wear Kara France down, and it's going to get increasingly lopsided as we go along. And I'm actually picking the finish here. Give me Askarov by third round submission. Nothing slick, no submission of the year contender, but just an exhausted Kara France getting pelted, getting elbowed, ends up giving up his back and gets choked out or something in the third round. Next up, we have a flyweight matchup between two women who came to the UFC undefeated and have had mixed results since then. Two who represent the family gym in two very different ways. It is Joanne Wood versus Alexa Grasso. Wood, the 35-year-old Scot by way of Las Vegas, the first lady of Syndicate MMA, is 15-7 overall. She is even 7-7 in the UFC since joining as a veteran of the 20th season of The Ultimate Fighter. She is currently on a 2-fight losing streak, those two coming against Lauren Murphy and Tyla Santos, who choked her out in the first round at UFC Fight Night Vieira versus Tate last November. Her last win was a unanimous decision over Jessica Ai all the way back in January of 2021. She's taking on Grasso. The 28-year-old Mexican is 13-3 overall. She's 5-3 since joining the UFC as a top strawweight contender in Invicta FC. She represents Lobo Gym, which is her family's gym. And she is on a 2-fight win streak, those two being unanimous decisions over Ji Yeon Kim in what was her flyweight debut, and then Macy Barber, whom she beat via unanimous decision last February at UFC 258. Grasso is a moderate favorite here. She's minus 200. Wood is plus 170. Keith, we were talking a little bit, and I can't remember whether the recorder was going or not, just, about how Wood will sometimes look like a world beater and then just sometimes look, really, really flat or really flawed and lose badly. How do you see this one playing out? Who wins and what does it look like?
Yeah, I don't understand Wood. It's hard to grasp that. Like, is she good or is she absolutely shitty? Which would gotta show up? I don't know.
This is starting to sound like a tongue twister. How much Wood? Yeah.
Yeah. the more recently, like the shitty Wood has showed up. I want her to be good. I want the good Wood to show up. I mean, she's just like a likable person, like with that sweet, soft Scottish voice. Like I just like I want to make her into like Alarm Clark. Like when my like alarm goes off and I'm like feeling all shitty, just be like in her Scottish voice, being like say something nice, like get up and make the world a better place or something. And I just want to get up and do something. But she fights for a living and she's not that good at it. So Goodwood is a Muay Thai striker with a high volume, busy jab, forcing her opponents back with teep kicks, using her Muay Thai skills in the clinch and with knees and elbows. She can sneak in a takedown, a lot of leg kicks, high kicks, stepping knees. But the bad Wood is no power, chin high in the air, pulling her head straight back. Again, I said it again. I wrote it down twice. Lack of power, very weak takedown defense. I mean, Andrea Lee took her down 3 times. In fairness, her takedown defense did look a little bit better against Jessica Eye, but then she was taken down by Santos and submitted, and she's always struggled on her back. I mean, Maia submitted her, Jessica Andrade, Marina Moreau,
Santos.
Santos,
yeah.
Rose Namajunas, going back to like the tough days, submitted her. It's hard to have confidence. Now, Grasso's a good striker, very technically sound, light on the feet, good footwork, good movement, good athlete overall, high output, quick hands, nice combinations, high guard defense, good kicks. She's been adding like this, like doubling up. Like the first kick goes low, the second kick goes high, or vice versa, which is really fun to watch. Very unique style. Negative is she was taken down by Carlos Esparza in their fight a lot, but like it just gets to the point where just like, yeah, pretty much everyone gets taken down by Carlos Esparza. Like, because the point where like Carlos Esparza is really good. Like, yeah, honestly, Carlos Esparza is pretty much like the female Curtis Blaydes, or vice versa. Like they're really good. But she was throwing up some submissions. She made it tough for like of Carlos Esparza's like recent like heavy wrestling wins. It was actually one of the harder ones. Like she was tossing up submissions. She almost caught her in a submission a couple times. And then also I just like the output and the cardio. Like her output versus Karolina Kowalkiewicz was like a beautiful thing. How bad she beat Karolina Kowalkiewicz, which obviously I understand is not a win that aged well. I'm not super confident that. I'm not super confident because I feel like the best Wood, if showed up, could give Alexa Grasso a really good fight. However, I just don't trust her too. I think Grasso's going to get inside. Like she really has to get inside the kicking range, force Wood back on her feet, which I think she will do. Or if she's in the kicking range, she's throwing kicks back, so it's not just Wood throwing the kicks. And I'm gonna take the striking battle. I'm gonna go with a boxer over the kickboxer in this matchup. Give me Grasso by decision.
Yeah, I like how you've broken that down. You know, both of these women, former strawweights, probably both better at flyweights, but Grasso just feels to me as though she has a lot more to offer than Wood at this point. I mean, the comparison that I always use for Joanne Wood is the female Duane Ludwig, because like in her Muay Thai career before, like she really got heavily into MMA, and then early in her MMA career, like her technique was really clean. I remember like Jack Slack doing a whole like article with gifs about her because he was so kind of enamored with like how clean her footwork and her technique was. But even so, like she's still prone to getting outstruck by fighters that may not be as technically sound, but are just better athletes, like faster to the punch. They hit harder. They're stronger. That's what it was like for Duane Ludwig. Like Duane Ludwig would absolutely have beaten Paul Daly at point karate. Daly knocked him out in the real fight. And like Ludwig, did not pick up the ground game by osmosis. Like even good Joanne Wood that you're mentioning here, and I'm with you on the whole. There's good and bad Joanne Wood. Even good Joanne Wood is still a liability on the ground. Can still be out wrestled, and is really, really rough submission defense when she's down there. And because of that, even if good Wood shows up, the people who've beaten Alexa Grasso in the UFC, aside from her first loss to Felice Herrig, which, you know, at the time I was kind of bummed that the UFC had pulled Grasso over from Invicta so early, and I thought the Herrig fight kind of proved that she wasn't ready and it was going to be bad for her and bad for Invicta and not really help the UFC. I've been wrong about that, but since then, the people that have beaten Grasso have out-wrestled her. The best Joanne Wood that shows up is not going to follow that path to victory. So, I mean, for me, this is a pretty easy one. I think Grasso wins this one. Wood is tough, and she's defensively capable of taking care of herself on the feet, even, you know, when she's not throwing enough volume. So I'm not going to pick her to get knocked out. I mean, she still never has been, but I think Grasso's going to win a pretty straightforward decision here. So, you know, give me Alexa Grasso to survive, advance. That's 3 straight wins at flyweight. I mean, considering how desperate the division is for someone to fight Valentina Shevchenko, there's a possibility that she, if she wins convincingly, might be the closest one on this card to a title shot. That brings us to the main event of UFC on ESPN 33, UFC Columbus. It is a high-level heavyweight matchup between Curtis Blaydes and Chris Daukaus. Blaydes, the 31-year-old Oklahoma-born fighter fighting out of Colorado, I believe it is now. I believe he's Elevation Fight Team. He is 15-3 with 1 no contest overall. He's 10-3 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He did win his last time out. It was a unanimous decision over Jairzinho Rozenstruik at UFC 266 last September. That allowed him to turn things around after his second-round knockout loss to Derek Lewis last February. Prior to that, he had been on a 4-fight win streak. He is taking on Daukaus, who will be looking to get things back on track after his own loss to Lewis. The 32-year-old Philadelphia native is 12-4 overall. He is 4-1 since joining the UFC as a former heavyweight standout at CFFC. He fought for the heavyweight title, didn't win it, but he is 4-1 since joining the UFC. He won his first 4 fights out of the gate, and in so doing, advanced himself from a guy who entered fairly anonymously with low expectations. I've jokingly called him the other Daukaus brother. He's definitely not that anymore. He's beaten Parker Porter, Rodrigo Nascimento, Alexey Oleynik, and Shamil Abdurakhimov. All 4 of those were TKOs. 3 of them were in the first round. That got him a top 5 matchup with Lewis, which ended badly as he got knocked out in the first round. That was in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 199 last December. Blaydes is a comfortable favorite here. He's minus 320. Daukaus is plus 250. Keith, I'll go first on this one because I think my breakdown is pretty simple. That doesn't mean I'm going to talk a short time. I'll still probably spend too long explaining it. But at this point, we've seen the way to beat Curtis Blaydes. The problem is it takes a special fighter to do it. You know, like it's pretty obvious now. Curtis Blaydes is a good enough striker. Like I don't think he's a terrible striker. I think he's good enough, especially considering that the purpose of his striking is to set up his takedowns. He's the most prolific heavyweight takedown artist in UFC history. By my eyeball test, I think he's probably the greatest heavyweight takedown artist of all time. And he's the kind that I, as a former wrestler myself, I as a amateur wrestling fan, and you as well, I love it. He's one of the guys that he shoots the blast double. I put him somewhere in between like Lesnar and Velasquez for how he uses it, but yeah, he shoots the double. He shoots through the guy's hips. I mean, he will elevate and slam him down. Mostly he's just interested in going through him like a freight train, getting him off their feet, and preferably landing in side control. He's fantastic. And the way to beat him is you have to fight off at least one of those and then hit him hard enough afterwards that you put him out. Who has done that? Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis. And that is it. It takes a special fighter to do this. I mean, Lewis did it to him, but it's not like someone had unlocked a new cheat code to beat Curtis Blaydes, because he fought Jairzinho Rozenstruik his very next fight. Jairzinho Rozenstruik caught him flush with an intercepting knee on one of his takedown attempts. And because it didn't knock him dead, Blaydes still won the fight easily. Like, it's not just enough to meet his takedown. The reason Lewis won, it wasn't because he caught him with the submarine uppercut. It's that the submarine uppercut killed him. And that's what makes this fight pretty easy for me to pick, because I think Daukaus has a ton of potential at heavyweight. He's light on his feet. He's one of the best boxers in the division. Good footwork. Despite the fact that, he looks a little like loose around the midsection, he's lost like 20 pounds since he's been in the UFC. And he was a plus athlete by heavyweight standards, even when he was like 260. Like, he's an athletic heavyweight. He's a good boxer. He has decent power for heavyweight, but he doesn't have like one-shot kill shot power for heavyweight, at least not on the level of Lewis or Ngannou. Because of that, like, I can see him foiling the first couple of takedown attempts and maybe like frustrating Blaydes on the feet for a while, but he's not going to catch Blaydes with one thing behind the ear that just puts him down. Or if he does catch him with a great uppercut on the way in, like Lewis did, I don't think it's going to be enough to knock him out. It might foil that takedown attempt and kind of have him stumbling away or something. But yeah, this feels pretty straightforward to me. The question in my mind is, what does the fight look like once Blaydes sets up shop on top? We haven't seen much of Chris Daukaus's ground game. Just we haven't had to. The people who would have tested it, the Alexey Oleyniks of the world, didn't get much of a chance to. Shamil Abdurakhimov probably would have liked to. He didn't get a chance to. So I'm going to assume that in the year plus now since Daukaus has gone to training full time, he's taken a hiatus from his job as a police officer. His all-around game has improved, and I'm going to assume he's capable of taking care of himself pretty well on the ground. So I'm not going to pick Blaydes to get the finish here, but give me Blaydes by a dominant decision. I think we're going to see maybe like a 49-45 thing where Daukaus does win a round, but Blaydes gets a 10-8 somewhere in there. Yeah. But yeah, I have Blaydes big in this one.
Yeah, I said this last time. I'll say it again. The thing that jumps out to me with Curtis Blaydes, he's 31. Like, again, we've seen him around for so long. We might not even see a prime Curtis Blaydes yet, which is, it's so funny because I just think of him so much older than that, especially like 37 or 38, and he's only 31. He's a massive heavyweight. He just built different than guy, like not even just like weight and size. Like, he's got this weird frame, he's longer arms, but like broad shoulders.
May I? I think I've said this before on one of our previews, but if you just put him against a wall and didn't put someone next to him to show his size, you could think that he's like, maybe like a 6'2", like middleweight or light heavyweight. He doesn't have the body that most UFC heavyweights do, even the ones that are in shape. Yeah. Like, his chest isn't as deep. He's got long arms. Yeah, he's just got a different frame.
Yeah, just kind of weird. Now,
it's like a football tight end or something.
Yeah, he gets categorized as a one-dimensional fighter, and it's really just because his wrestling's so good. His stand-up has come a long way. Like, yeah, we remember him getting knocked out, but like those long, weird arms land. He uses feints. He shoulder rolls a lot. So he's like kind of boxing style. He's got a very powerful straight right. Big power, hard leg kicks. But, I mean, don't get me wrong. He still uses the striking to close the distance to get his takedowns. His chin is worrisome, but I think you made a good point. Like, the guys who have knocked him out of the two scariest hitters in the history of MMA, Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis. And you mentioned another thing, that he's the best wrestler in UFC heavyweight division. Like, I don't mean like if he lined up all the wrestlers, him and Cain Velasquez and Brock Lesnar, like he's gonna win. But I mean, for his game, like he has used wrestling the best than anybody. Great entries. He blasts right through the hips. He's gets guys down like Shamil Abdurakhimov. He put him on his back, had no answer for. Volkov, he spent most of the fight on his back. He just slowly works inch by inch to get a better position, looks to control. Once he kind of wears, lays on his opponent, then he unloads some of the best ground and pound you'll see. The one concern I've had that I've seen in his grappling was the one Volkov fight. He kind of gassed out a little later, but I think that was just from getting so many takedowns. Now, Daukaus he's another guy, like he has a weird body, but he's a much better athlete than you would think. Like, he moves well. He's a technically sound striker, pretty fast. He's accurate. He's got plus power. I'd say he's got 4 knockouts. Again, he was knocking out not the best competition. So like that's why I'm not saying he has great power. But fast for heavyweight, like quick hands. He added kicking to his game, which I like, not necessarily against Curtis Blaydes, but in other fights. Surprisingly quick high kick. But the big mistake, and I said this last time, and I said he's going to have to avoid this against Derek Lewis, and he did not, is he backed straight up. I mean, Parker Porter had him backing straight up. Abdurrahimov in a fight that he was working him over, had him backing straight up. And then Derek Lewis made him pay. When he backed up, Derek Lewis just swarmed in, didn't give him a chance to kind of get an escape. He kind of cut off the escape, landed those big shots, and put him out. Now, what he should have did was try to clinch at that point, because he's a good clinch striker. Elbows, knees inside. He's a very underrated grappler. Not a powerful wrestler, but if he gets the fight to the ground, he is a Brazilian black belt. He can get some subs. So I have, if anybody's never watched the previews or don't remember, I have one rule when it comes to predictions. I have one rule, and my rule is I'm a police officer. If people don't know, I love being a police officer. I care more about being a profession of being a police officer than picking a fight right. I have one rule, and that is don't ever pick against a police officer, even if I think they're going to lose. I usually try to sell, like in my breakdown, what I would do if I wasn't a police officer, if that person wasn't. Chris Daukaus isn't a police officer anymore, so he decided to leave the police force, as far as I know. So I can pick against him, and I'm going to do this because I think Curtis Blaydes is a terrible stylistic matchup for Chris Daukaus. Everything you said, because you mentioned it. You need to be one. You have to have the power of Francis Ngannou and Derek Lewis, but also the thing that, and obviously we're going to sidetrack from Daukaus and talk about those two guys, that they don't get enough credit for is their accuracy. Like Derek Lewis, that's the guy that a lot of people categorize him wrong. Like the punch he landed on Curtis Blaydes, he was catching him coming in. Very few people are going to pick that. Like that's a timing thing with the power, and very few people are going to do that. Now, if Daukaus backs up, that is hopefully he learned his lesson. Hopefully he starts cutting at angles. It's two terrible things. One, Blaydes can land a big shot. He can come in. I think Daukaus is the kind of guy that he can get a knockout on coming in, especially if you wonder what the last knockout against Derek Lewis was. And if I'm being honest, like it wasn't a super short turnaround, but he wasn't out that long either. Like I don't know how many months ago.
It was December, so 3.5 months.
Yeah, like I guess that's decent. It's not like a real quick turnaround, but it's like not 6 months, something like you've seen other guys do. But also, if you back straight up, your ability to sprawl. If I don't call him Derek Lewis. If Curtis Blaydes shoots on his hips and you can't sprawl, he pulls you out. You get pinned against the cage. Obviously, you can wall work, but if you can't, you get pinned against the cage. And that's what I expect to see. I expect Curtis Blaydes to take him down. I expect him to pin him against the canvas, land ground and pound. I think he's going to do that 2 or 3 times. I expect Curtis Blaydes to eventually pin him in a position where he can't really move. Maybe he's stuck against the cage. Maybe at that point, Curtis Blaydes starts getting, bringing himself, posturing up more, landing harder shots. I actually think he's going to finish him. I think he's going to land some ground strikes. I'm going to say he gets a 3rd round TKO.
There you have it. 2 pretty emphatic picks for Curtis Blaydes to get the job done against Chris Daukaus in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 33. You got something else that looked like you're about to say? Okay.
No, it's a good card though. It's a good card. It's top to bottom.
Good card, top to bottom. This has been the Sherdog Radio preview. I've been your host, Ben Duffy. He is Keith Schillen, of course. If you are already familiar with our show, then I'm about to tell you to show up at the recap, which will just be 15 minutes after the main event. We'll be live on the Sherdog YouTube page, where we will take your questions, your comments, your hot takes. We'll talk about what happened, what was good, what was bad, what was controversial, what's next for the winners as well as the losers. We'd love to have you there. We have a good core of regulars that kind of come and share their wisdom and their humor with us, and we would love for you to join us. Between now and then, make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to make a comment on this video. Keith and I are both pretty good about coming back around and replying to those. But thank you for watching. Enjoy the rest of your week and enjoy the fights.